Hey there. Before I retired at 55 at the end of 2024, I thought the hard part was figuring out whether the numbers work to retire. And that does matter a lot. Don't get me wrong. Of course, you do need to know where your income is coming from. You need to know about health insurance. You need to understand taxes, Social Security, cash flow, market downturns, and all the other things that can quietly turn a good retirement plan into a very expensive guessing game. But now that I've been retired for about 17 months, I've realized something that would have been hard for me to fully appreciate before I actually did it. The money plan gets you to retirement, but it doesn't automatically tell you how to live once you get there. What I mean is that there are things about retirement, especially early retirement, that don't show up in a spreadsheet and you don't really realize until you're there. So, in this video, I want to talk about the 10 things I've learned since I've retired. So, you might better prepare for it if you're not retired, or if you are, you can probably relate to many of these. I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments, and I'm sure the viewers of this video that have not retired would love what you share as well. The first thing I'd tell you is this: retirement is not really about escaping work. That might be the starting point, and I get it. If you're burned out, stressed out, tired of being stuck in endless meetings, dealing with corporate nonsense, retirement can look like freedom from all of that. And it is, don't get me wrong. There's something wonderful about waking up on a Monday morning and realizing nobody is expecting you to log in, show up, explain or fix anything, approve anything, or sit through a meeting where everyone already knows what the decision should be, but somehow it takes 47 minutes to get there. That part is great. But if retirement is only built around what you're escaping, I've learned that can be a problem because eventually the relief wears off. Not completely. I still appreciate not having the old work stress. But after a while, not working becomes normal. And then the question becomes, okay, now what? That's the part I think people underestimate. Retirement is not just the absence of a job, it's the presence of a different life. And that means you have to give that life some shape. Not a rigid schedule, but some kind of rhythm that matters. I think most people, before they retire, and I'm just as guilty as this, imagine retirement as unlimited free time. And that sounds amazing when free time is scarce when you're working. But unlimited free time is different. When you're working, a free afternoon feels valuable because it's rare. When every afternoon is free, it can start to lose its meaning unless you're intentional about it. And that surprised me. I knew I wanted freedom. I knew I wanted control over my time. I knew I didn't want work deciding the shape of my days anymore. But I also learned pretty quickly that freedom works better when it has some structure. That might be exercise, it might be hobbies, it might be travel, it might be family time, it might be volunteering, it might be creating something, it might be a few recurring things during the week that give your life a little rhythm. For me, this channel and my podcast has become part of that rhythm. I know some people would look at making videos and podcasts and saying, well, that sounds like a lot of work. And in some ways, it is work, but there is a big difference between work you have to do because someone else owns your calendar and time, and work you choose to do because it gives you purpose, creativity, connection, or a reason to keep learning. And that distinction really matters. In retirement, the goal is not necessarily to do nothing. I can't imagine just sitting around and doing nothing. I would get so bored so fast and would regret retiring. The goal is to do more of what feels worth doing, what you want to do, what brings meaning to you, and having the freedom to do it. That's what retirement is all about. And that brings me to the second thing I tell you. Your best retirement years are not as far away as you think. A lot of retirement planning is built around the fear of running out of money late in life, and that fear isn't wrong. Nobody wants to be 82 years old and finding out they didn't plan correctly and have to go back to work. To me, that's a nightmare scenario, and you can bet I did my best to plan for that to never happen. But there is another risk that doesn't get talked about enough, and I truly feel this now that I'm retired. It's the risk of saving the best years of retirement for a version of yourself that may not exist anymore. When you're in your 40s or 50s, it's easy to assume that your future self will still have the same energy, same mobility, same interests, same health, same spousal health, same willingness to travel, same desire to take on big adventures. Maybe you will, and I certainly hope you do, but that's certainly not guaranteed. One of the biggest reasons early retirement interested me was not just that I wanted to stop working, it was that I wanted to own more of my healthy years. Now that's the real currency. Money matters, time matters, health matters. But the magic is when you have enough of all three at the same time. When you're younger, you may have health and time, but not much money. During your peak working years, you may have money and health, but very little time. Later in life, you may have money and time, but health can become that wild card. But now that I'm 57, I've come to realize that I'm really in probably the best years of my life where I have an abundance of the currencies of health, wealth, and time. I've got the trifecta of happiness. And that's the wonderful thing of having retired early at 55. If you're in your 50s or early 60s and you have enough money, decent health, and a clear desire to do something different with your life, that is not something to casually ignore. This window of time when the currencies of wealth, health, and time are all aligned really matter. And I don't say that to push anyone into retiring early if they're not ready financially. But I do think a lot of people, when weighing when to retire, don't account for the risk of working too long, even when financially they can retire. Yes, every extra year of work never hurts financially, but it also costs a year of your life, and not all years are equal. A healthy year at 56 is not going to be the same as when you're 76. That doesn't mean everyone should retire at 55 like I did, and it definitely doesn't mean you should walk into your boss's office tomorrow and say, some guy on YouTube told me time is precious, so I'm out. But it does mean that when you're doing the math, don't only ask, can I afford to retire? Also ask, what am I trading away by waiting? The third thing I tell you is that your retirement budget may be more flexible than you think, but only if you understand what really changes. Before retirement, it's easy to think about spending as one big number. We spend this much now, therefore we need this much later. But retirement changes the shape of spending. Some expenses will go up, some go down, some disappear, and some sneak in from the side. Healthcare is the obvious one for early retirees, especially if you retire before Medicare. That has to be planned carefully. Believe me, as someone in retirement managing it. What I also didn't realize as much before retirement is that taxes can also change dramatically. When you stop getting a regular paycheck, you may suddenly have more control over what shows up as income on paper, but also more responsibility for making smart decisions to reduce your taxes in retirement. Also, travel may go up, hobbies may go up. Those two in particular certainly did for me, but it makes sense, right? Because I'm still young and healthy enough to enjoy traveling and for doing the hobbies I really enjoy. My gardening hobby alone this year has probably quadrupled in scope. Then there's home projects that you now have more time to spend on. And some costs of working may go down or disappear, like commuting costs, work clothes, convenience meals, that I'm exhausted, so let's just order something tax. Or buying things as a reward for your work stress, and because you've worked so hard, you tell yourself you deserve it when they are things you really don't need. That was one of the things I didn't fully appreciate before retirement. When you're busy all the time, convenience becomes a survival tool. In retirement, you may have more time to cook, compare options, handle things yourself if you want to, or simply avoid spending money to make a stressful week feel less stressful because that stress is gone. Now, I'm not saying retirement automatically makes you frugal, but I am saying that your spending may not follow a straight line. And that's why I'm not a big fan of retirement rules that act like you spend the same amount forever, adjusted neatly for inflation. Most people don't. There are usually phases. The early years may be more active, more travel, more projects, more catching up on things you said you do when you finally had the time. Then things may settle. Then later, health expenses may become the bigger concern. So if you're planning for retirement, especially early retirement, don't just ask, what's my annual spending number? Ask, how might that number change over time? And just as important, ask which expenses are really tied to work stress and just simply lack of time, because those may not follow you into retirement. The fourth thing I'd tell you is that taxes become a lot more interesting after retirement. I realize interesting taxes is not a phrase that makes you really want to perk up and really pay attention to this video. But this is a big deal. When you're working, especially if you're a W 2 employee, taxes mostly happen to you. Your paycheck comes in, money gets withheld, you file your return. In retirement, especially early retirement, taxes become much more strategic. Where you pull money from matters: taxable brokerage accounts, traditional retirement accounts, Roth accounts, cash, capital gains, dividends, interest, Social Security later on. They all interact differently. And before Medicare, your income can also affect health insurance subsidies if you're using the Affordable Care Act marketplace. That's why I think early retirees need to stop thinking of withdrawals, taxes, and health insurance as separate topics. They're all connected. If you pull too much from the wrong place at the wrong time, it might not just raise your tax bill, it could affect health insurance costs too. On the other hand, if you're too afraid to create taxable income, you might miss opportunities to do Roth conversions, fill those lower tax brackets to help manage future required minimum distributions or RMDs, or set up a bigger long term plan. There isn't one answer that works for everyone. And if you've been listening to my podcasts or watching my videos, you've heard this before. Retirement planning is not one size fits all because everyone's situation is different. And I know that can be annoying, but it's also very important because the right move depends on your age, your account types, your health insurance situation, your future Social Security, your spouse's situation, the state you live in, your spending, and your risk tolerance, just to name a few things. So when someone says always do Roth conversions, I get nervous. When someone says never do Roth conversions before Medicare, I also get nervous. The best answer is understand the trade offs. Early retirement can create a rare planning window. You may have years where you are no longer earning a paycheck, not yet collecting Social Security, and not yet taking required minimum distributions. And that window can be incredibly useful, but it can also be easy to waste if you don't know what you're trying to optimize. And this is where I think my perspective has changed since retiring. Before retirement, tax planning can feel like something you do at the end of the year. After retirement, tax planning starts to feel like part of how you fund your life. It becomes much more active. The fifth thing I'd tell you is make sure you've got a solid plan when the market takes a tumble, because when you're retired and living off your investments, mentally and emotionally, it feels very different than when you're earning a paycheck. Know how long an average market downturn and recovery lasts. Know the history going into retirement and plan accordingly. For example, Charles Schwab notes that since 1966, the average bear market has lasted about 14 months. And in another Schwab market study, recoveries after the bottom have often taken about 3.5 years to get back near the old peak. Now, that's a long time to be winging it with no plan. So, know how you're going to fund your retirement without selling equities at a loss, and know how many years of money you want set aside based on your own risk tolerance, so you're not forced to sell stocks at the worst possible time. Let me tell you, from someone in retirement, there is nothing better than having a solid cash runway set up so you basically can ignore the whims of the stock market. Talk about peace of mind. In fact, this is so important. I have a whole separate video on setting up a solid cash runway and how to do it and maintain it that I'll link in the description. The sixth thing I tell you is that relationships become much more important in retirement, not less. This is one of those things everyone nods along with, but I don't think it fully lands until you have more control over your time. Work gives you built-in social contact. You see people, you talk to people, you are part of something. When you retire, that built-in structure changes, and if you're not careful, your world can get smaller. That doesn't mean you need to become wildly social. I'm not, but you do need to be intentional about connection. Family, friends, neighbors, former coworkers you actually liked, people who share your interests, communities where you can contribute, all of those things matter. When I think about what makes retirement feel good, it is not just the financial independence, it's the ability to spend time with people I care about, to be available in ways that were harder when work owned so much of my attention and time. That is one of the real benefits of retirement, but it doesn't happen automatically. You have to make an effort and set aside time for it. But it really does make a huge difference. The seventh thing I'd tell you is that your identity may change more than you expect. This can be a big one. It certainly was for me, and it took me months to mentally get over this one. Much bigger of an impact than I ever thought, and I certainly wasn't prepared for it. For decades, people ask, what do you do? And most of us answer with our job. Even if we don't love the job, it becomes part of how we explain ourselves. Think about it. For decades, you've built your career. It was part of who you are. It gave you a role, a status, a rhythm, a reason to be needed. Then retirement comes along and removes that label. And even if you wanted to retire, even if you're ready for it, even if you were counting down the days, it can still feel strange. Believe me, it really does. Like me, you may go from being the person who makes decisions, leads teams, solves problems, manages money, runs projects, or handles pressure to being someone who no longer has that role. And that can be freeing, but it's also disorienting. And I don't think you need to have some grand second act figured out. I certainly didn't. You don't need to start a charity, write a book, climb a mountain, and learn Italian, but you do need to allow yourself the grace to evolve. That person you were at work is not the only version of you. I've been retired, like I said, about 17 months, and I can tell you I am not the person I once was. I've been reinvented. I'm no longer Mike, the healthcare IT analyst and manager, but Mike, the early retiree, a content creator, a gardener, piano player, and much more. Retirement gives you room to become someone else. You will not be the same person any longer. I'm a different person. Besides all that I've mentioned already, I'm calmer. I'm more creative. I'm more present to my family and friends. I'm definitely more focused on my health, and I'm more willing to try things without needing them to turn into achievements. And I think you will find that as well when you retire, if you're not already. The eighth thing I'll tell you is that experiences matter more than stuff, but not in the cliche way people usually say it. It's easy to say spend more money on experiences, not things. And generally, I think there's truth in that. But I'd frame it a little differently. Spend money on what creates lasting value in your life. Sometimes that's travel. Sometimes that's time with family. Sometimes it's a hobby. Sometimes it's making your home more comfortable because you're spending a lot more time there now. Sometimes it's a tool or purchase that improves your daily life. So I'm not anti stuff. I like stuff that earns its keep. What I'm less interested in is buying things mainly to signal something to other people because the older I get and the more I live outside the work driven status machine in my retirement life, the more I'm convinced that most people are not thinking about us nearly as much as we imagine. The reality is, nobody really cares what kind of car you drive. Nobody is rating how impressive your vacation was. I've stopped trying to impress people who are mostly busy thinking about themselves anyway. Instead, what I've learned, and I think what becomes more important, is to ask what actually improves your life. What gives you memories? What gives you connection? What gives you peace? What gives you health? What makes your ordinary Tuesday better? Those are much better questions than what will people think. The ninth thing I tell you is that health span matters more than lifespan. Of course, everyone wants to live a long time. I do too, but I think my perspective has changed in retirement. And the more useful question is how long can you live well? How long can you move the way you want to move, travel the way you want to travel, walk the neighborhoods you want to explore, work in the garden, take care of yourself, enjoy your hobbies, and actually use the freedom you work so hard to create? That's health span. And it needs to be a core part of your retirement plan, not an afterthought. Because what is the point of building a retirement around freedom if your body can't actually participate? Now, some health issues are outside our control. Bad things happen, genetics matter, accidents happen. Life just isn't fair about this stuff, but that's not an excuse to ignore the things we can control. We can control sleep, movement, strength training, nutrition, stress, preventative care, staying socially connected, not spending retirement fused to a recliner. Your retirement funds can pay for the trip. Your health determines whether you can actually enjoy it. And this is one of the areas where retirement can help if you use it well. It certainly has for me. Yeah, I have more time to take care of myself, more time to sleep. I don't have the work stress anymore, more time to build healthy routines that were hard to maintain when work was consuming my day. But again, you have to make this all part of your retirement way of life and make a conscious effort at it. The 10th thing I tell you, and it's probably one of the most important ones, is to be careful who you take retirement advice from. Now, that may sound odd since I'm sitting here giving retirement advice, but here's what I mean. Retirement advice is not one size fits all. Someone who retired with a pension may see the world differently than someone retiring entirely on investments. Someone with their mortgage paid off may see the world differently than someone with a mortgage. Someone retiring at 67 with Medicare and Social Security may have a very different situation from someone retiring at 55 who needs to bridge 10 years to Medicare and perhaps even longer to Social Security, depending on when they're taking it. That is why I'm careful about blanket statements. And if you've watched my videos or listened to my podcast, you know you'll not ever get a blanket statement from me. And I know that can be annoying, but you'll never hear blanket statements like take Social Security at 62. Never take Social Security at 62. Always delay, never delay. Always do Roth conversions, never do Roth conversions. Keep 2 years of cash, keep 10 years of cash. Spend more, spend less. You can find someone confidently arguing every version of retirement advice. And some of them will sound very convincing. The question is not, does this advice sound smart? The question is, does this apply to my actual situation? The best retirement plan is not built around blanket statements. It's built around trade-offs, and I've come to realize this even more as an early retiree. You need to know what you're optimizing for and the trade-offs you'll need to make to get there. For example, are you optimizing for lower taxes, more flexibility, less stress, more guaranteed income, a bigger legacy, a simpler life? The answer can be different for many different people. And even for the same person, that answer can change over time. So, yes, learn from other people, watch videos, read books, use tools, talk to professionals when it makes sense. But don't outsource your judgment completely. At the end of the day, you are the one who has to live it. And I can tell you, as an early retiree, living it is very different than how it looked on paper. Well, that's my list. If you've already retired, I'd love to hear what you'd add to this list. And if you're still planning for retirement, tell me which of these surprised you the most. And I hope you found this video helpful and that it will help you plan better for your retirement life and know what to expect. Before we go, some freebies to share that are available on my Patreon, and the link is in the description. You can join for free and download these from my tools library. First, you can download my 12-step early retirement planning checklist. It's a practical, easy-to-follow guide that walks you through everything from calculating your FIRE number to building a tax-efficient withdrawal strategy. Second, if you're on an ACA health plan or are planning to be if and when you retire, download my ebook, ACA Premium Shock Fix, 10 Ways to Pay Less for Marketplace Coverage all year long. This ebook gives you a clear, practical framework to lower your ACA premiums legally by understanding and controlling the income number that drives your subsidy, MAGI, or modified adjusted gross income. And lastly, download my ACA MAGI Estimator. It's an Excel template that can be used to estimate your MAGI for ACA health insurance. And you can also use it to keep track of your MAGI if you're currently on ACA health insurance to help stay within the 400% FPL threshold to maintain subsidies. And if you're interested in more help and while you're on my Patreon taking advantage of the free downloads, you may want to consider joining. I have 3 different levels to meet your budget and needs. The first level is access to the additional tools I've created. The second level gives access to those, plus ad-free and early access to all my podcast episodes before a new episode gets out to the public. And the final level gives you access to directly ask your retirement questions to me. Lastly, go to mikeupland.com for all of my media. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take care and make the most of today.